Welcome back to the channel. It's time to get the retro comic book crew back together. And this time we're doing a big monumental DC Marvel crossover, Superman versus Spider-Man. Very fantastic comic book, I believe, from 1979.
76.
I was only 76. I wasn't even born yet. My goodness. And here to talk to me about that, as always, is award-winning comic book editor Joe Corralo. How you doing, Joe?
I'm all right, Wes. How are you?
I'm doing fantastic. And also with us is the voice of the voiceless, the man so cool they call him the Breen. He's been reading comic books longer than I've been alive and you've been alive. Eric Breen, how you doing?
I'm old enough to have bought this when it came out.
Very nice. In January of 1976, Gerry, Conway, Ross, Andru. We don't see these big collaborations all that much anymore. I know a lot of people would hope that we would get a big DC Marvel crossover. How the hell did these things even come together, Joe?
Well, in instances like this is a little before you have gigantic corporations owning both companies. You had Stan Lee and Carmine Infantino, Stan obviously over at Marvel, although he's more doing the TV stuff at that point, and, Carmine Infantino, running DC, and they had worked together before in the golden age of comics. So they had a rapport, and the amount of talent that had bounced back and forth at this point, it wasn't too hard to find people that could, write and draw both characters who had already done so.
Breen, when this stuff happened back in the day, did it feel special at the time, or was it something that just kind of felt like it should just be on the shelf?
Well, first I said, a year prior, they had gotten together to do a Wizard of Oz special.
Correct.
Kind of like to test the water, see how they could coexist, and that led to this. And no, this was a big deal. Now, I'd only been in the hobby for a couple months, and even I could tell it was a big deal because it was, heavily promoted in both books, and it was like, found out going forward how special this was because it was something that at the time no one thought would ever happen. Mm-hmm. It's hard to imagine that now, given all the crossovers that have come, since. But yeah, this was a huge, huge deal.
And they charged $2 for it in 1976, buddy. That's a pretty good change.
That was the price of treasuries at the time, and you could do treasuries back then because, they'd be on the newsstands. I can remember, I'll do any chore you want. I'll cut the grass. I'll wash the cars. Let me earn those $2.
Well, and I would say that Gerry, Conway, Ross, Andru, Stan Lee, Carmine Infantino, and everyone associated with this comic book absolutely earned their money because this thing is absolutely worth the hype. Superman versus Amazing Spider-Man. The story is called Battle of the Century. We start out with a couple of prologues to kind of get you ready for the story. First up, Joe, we do get the Superman story. There's an enormous robot going through Metropolis. Superman's trying to fight him, but he's got some pretty unique mechanisms to actually go against Superman. He's got gravity-defying boots and everything. Turns out it's Lex Luthor. Who could have imagined?
Yeah, no, it's pretty good. Well, apparently, Superman didn't even imagine, which he reluctantly tells him, frankly, no. He hadn't guessed. But yeah, it's, a very classic Superman sort of entry. The way it's paced out, you start with the action, there's stuff going on, then we get to dealing with the mundane life of Clark Kent. So I feel like it was done in a way that could help bring someone in who maybe was sticking with Marvel, wasn't as familiar with the DC characters, and I think Gerry does a good deal with that, vice versa later on. But yeah, I think he does this very well here.
Yeah, it's really fun when you finally get to see him. Like he kind of loses. He goes back to being Clark Kent, and this jerk off over at the news station, or I guess the newspaper center, Eric Breen decides he's going to play a trick on him, but Clark Kent gets the drop on him, and you can just see the kind of things going on between Lois and Superman before he realizes, I need to follow the tracks to where the robot came from, and he kind of discovers Lex underneath the water and is able to kind of apprehend him there.
Yeah, I think Joe said it best. The way this was set up, you basically got a Superman comic book, then a Spider-Man comic book. Kind of like, so if you were a one company or the other guy, it was enough of an introduction to where by the time they moved the story forward, you had been familiarized with both characters. And like I said, because you got little tropes that would happen in the Superman book, like Steve Lombard attempting to play a prank on Clark. These were great introductions because I said this book was, I said, if you believe that every comic book is somebody's first, well, it's a lot of people's first exposure to Superman and to Spider-Man. So these were good introductions to both characters.
Absolutely. The second epilogue is Spider-Man. We see something's going on. Spider-Man's going around. He's got a camera. There's a robbery in progress. He sets it up. It turns out as he gets into dealing with these thugs, Joe, Doc Ocka's behind it. And he kind of flummoxes him. I thought I just caught you, man.
Yeah, and this is a very generous Doc Ock that Ross Andru gives us here. He looks very fit here.
So we get that introduction to the character. Then we see probably my favorite part of the entire comic book here, Eric Breen. Peter Parker goes in. He's got the camera. He's got the photos. He wants to sell it to J. Jonah Jameson and the Daily Bugle so they can run their big headline story. He gets the money from him, and he's kind of a smart ass. I'll give him that. He's kind of sassing J. Jonah Jameson. When the photos come out and they see the cover, it's all blurred out. They weren't good pictures. And J. Jonah Jameson literally tries to murder him for it. I love that part. He loses it.
Yeah, that's something that it's weird. That's something they would have never done in Amazing Spider-Man, and they get away with doing it here. If your first exposure to Spider-Man is this, you're going, wow, this dude is crazy. But it fits the story. It exaggerated a trope in a way to get a laugh, and it kind of actually. And if you've been reading Spider-Man, you go, how has that not happened up till now? Not maybe JJJ coming across the desk, but all the times Peter Parker set up the automatic camera, how has it not failed like that until now? So it's like I said, it just added to the fun of the story.
And the prologues really do their job quite well. You get introduced to Superman in his world, Spider-Man in his world. You also get both the big villains apprehended. Lex Luthor, Doc Ock are going to prison at the exact same time, Joe, which ends up setting up this chance meeting of the two to kind of join forces. Turns out Lex Luthor does not plan on being in prison very long. He's got a taped up arm. He's got a bunch of contraptions, and he's able to spring both of them from the joint so they can join forces to take down their big nemesises, Superman and Spider-Man.
The old fake epidermis gets the cops every time. But yeah, no, Lex, of course, big genius. I feel like it's the book overall, they lean a little bit with the DC stuff. Lex is a little, smarter than Doc Ock, and obviously Superman. We'll get more into Superman being a physically stronger character than Spider-Man, but yeah, they end up working really great together, and it's funny. Like in all of these stories, it's like, maybe there were other supervillains that could have broken out and, maybe had an army of 8, 10, 12 supervillains to go up against Superman and Spider-Man. But it's like, nah, let's just break out the only two supervillains we introduced in this.
And now it's time. So we got the villains together. Now it's time to get Superman and Spider-Man together. And what happens is Lois Lane, it kind of ends up in a situation where she's falling. Peter Parker saves her. And then we get this great interaction, another one of my favorite parts, between Mary Jane and Lois Lane, and they start sassing each other. And Mary Jane's like, well, maybe he just doesn't like the strong, independent type. Maybe he likes a woman that's a little bit more feminine. And I kind of like the two characters, their first interaction together, kind of going after each other.
Again, playing on some of the tropes from the regular books. Almost every other issue in these days, Superman had to save Lois from something. And this time it's Peter Parker. To integrate the two worlds. Yeah, they have a conversation. Of course, they both are very familiar with each other's works. And then there's a confrontation with Mary Jane, who immediately gets catty. And she goes, now you pulling claws. He's cute, but I have my eyes set on him. And here comes Superman. She goes, wow, this is a wild coincidence. And then zaps two girls. And the best part, the reaction right after that of Peter Parker, they said, he's confused. They said, and if you think he is, and they show Clark Kent. So it's like, now, to the credit of this book, they didn't say, and Clark Kent, who was secretly Superman. By that time, they'd given us enough credit to know who he actually was. So
I also just got to throw in, imagine working on a book this intricate and being like, for this sequence, why have Peter Parker just in a regular, straight, black shirt. Let's add like a line in this like design on
Christmas
top of it,
sweater or something.
because we don't have enough to draw in this issue. So.
And another neat little touch when it's Peter Parker asking Clark Kent, "Phone booths, where are the phone booths?" And then they go
heading off in different directions for phone booths.
Yeah.
Yes, absolutely love it. They recognize that there's two tropes that both the comic books use. So they kind of use that to their advantage. Now, obviously, Superman has shown up and he zapped the ladies away. Clark Kent has seen this and been like, that's not Superman because I'm Superman. I need to save the day. And Spider-Man, Peter Parker's observed this and he's going, I've heard of Superman. What the hell is he doing? He just, zapped away my best gal and Lois Lane, one of the world's most famous reporters. They both show up and obviously Spider-Man's like, screw this guy. Superman's looking for the fake Superman, and they end up having this big fight up in the sky. And we do learn there's no doubt about it, Superman is more powerful than Spider-Man by the time they're done with this. I think he breaks both of his hands trying to fight him, and he tries to punch him. He pulls his punch. He ends up shooting him like he's in a hurricane. That's how powerful Superman is in comparison to Spider-Man here.
Oh yeah, and there's some amazing splash images here of it's Ross Andru and Dick Giordano handling the pencils and inks for the figures. I think John Romita Sr. did a lot of the inkings of the backgrounds in terms of the figures themselves. That's Ross and Dick there. And I know we've said it before on this show, but Ross Andru, not saying he's the greatest artist that's ever worked on, Spider-Man or Wonder Woman. Oh, Wonder Woman's probably up there, but he's a really underrated artist. And it's really nice kind of having him work on a book like this where he can really flex all his muscles. Particularly of these, splashy images.
Absolutely wonderfully conceived and executed throughout here, Breen. And of course, they do come to an understanding. They're like, we shouldn't be fighting. Obviously, Spider-Man doesn't realize that a fake Superman did that, but he does finally get to explain that to him when he breaks both of his hands on him and can no longer really put up a fight against Superman anymore.
I like the way they set it up to where they hit Spider-Man with the red sun radiation so we can get a couple panels of him knocking Superman around, which is something that you never saw in those days. But it was kind of a neat, like, we're just kind of shooting the works at this point. And then, of course, when Superman, even with Spider-Man's enhanced power, he's not going to survive the punches. You said when he pulls that and it's like got a hurricane force. I love how when he comes back from it, that's when the red sun radiation wears off. So that's why he bounces and then he's like punching on him. And it looks like something out of a cartoon. But then I said, they realize that they need to team up. And then you look down, you go, we're already 60 pages into this book. And it just felt like, because I said it just goes by so quick.
So it's a great moment. They shake hands. They decide they're going to work together. And they realize, I guess down at a pier or something, there's a warehouse. Something shady is going on there. They arrive on the scene. I believe it's Lex Luthor and Doc Ock both appear to them. And they tell them, hey, we know where your girls are, but we're not really here. And they're kind of setting them up to end up, touching this computer that's going to blow them up. Superman ends up saving Spider-Man's life right there, Eric Breen.
The one, I guess, for lack of a better term, continuity error of the entire book, because his spider sense didn't warn him. And Superman, literally blows him away to save his life. But like I said, that should have warned him. But I think that was more to showcase another one of Superman's ability, the photographic memory, as he's able to reassemble the computer in the time it takes Spider-Man to blink an eye.
Yeah, no super heart massage in this issue, though.
Thank goodness.
Well, we only had 96 pages. We couldn't show all of his powers.
True.
But we do realize that they are back in Mount Kilimanjaro. It's been a hologram or whatever. They realize where they actually are. And we just get like this weird global expedition. They end up at Mount Kilimanjaro. They run into some local tribesmen or something there. It's really funny. They want to see what Superman's powers really are, Joe. They don't believe him. And he ends up juggling a few people from the tribe. He's like, is that enough? So they end up guiding him up to where some guys had gone missing. And there's an enhanced individual. It appears that he's also been souped up with some red sun radiation.
Exactly. They have that fight with the one warrior with the red sun radiation. But we get the melding of webbing with Superman's, eye
X-ray
beams that, makes it like
Hard as
hard as steel, and sure. So
they just leave him there with like the other tribesmen that was driving. Like, you take him, we're going into the cave.
I guess they were kind of like, how many more times are we really going to have Spider-Man and Superman teaming up? Let's say they do that, and that combination makes hard as steel webbing, and call it a day.
Heat vision plus webbing. Sure, why not?
Yeah.
That part was really fun. And so they realized the ladies aren't actually on Earth. They're in space on a satellite that belongs to the Injustice Gang. Doc Ock and Lex Luthor end up in space. So Superman and Spider-Man have to go meet them on the field battle in space. So this comic book has started out in Metropolis. It went to, obviously, New York City. We went to Mount Kilimanjaro. Now we're in space, and we're going to get this big final battle. And it turns out Doc Ock maybe isn't quite as evil as Lex Luthor there, Breen.
Yeah, I guess at this point, for anybody that cares, the thing that brings all the characters together is NASA is launching ComLab, which is going to be a communications center from space. That's what Lex takes over. That's his plot, his evil plot, and he's going to use that to blackmail the Earth. Then he gets the idea, well, why not blackmail the Earth? Earth's never respected me. I'll just use this to destroy the Earth. So, yeah, that's when you find out that Doc Ock, who also needs to be pointed out, is planning to do a heel turn on Lex, because he said the blackmail money is only enough for one man. But then, so since it truly is no honor among thieves, when Doc Ock realizes that Lex is going to destroy the Earth, he goes, "That's my home too." Attacks him. Oh, and also, I don't know if this would be count as a continuity error, but when Superman rips Doc Ock's arms off, it had been established that they were basically grafted to his body, so they felt
ripped his body in half.
Yeah, they felt pain the same as if you ripped off an appendage. So that may or may not, depending on what point in Doc Ock's career, that kind of went both ways. But yeah, so Doc Ock turns on Lex,
destroys the control panel as he has a moment of consciousness.
As we also find out that Lex has unleashed a gigantic tidal wave that's going to take out the entire eastern seaboard. So,
Joe, that stuff looked great. That art was amazing. That tidal wave.
Oh yeah, I mean the tidal wave alone you could see is like a fancy painting you could put in your living room. That's great.
Yeah, there's so many great splash pages, and this thing is action packed. And despite being like 96 pages, it's like almost 100-page comic. It reads like it's nothing. Like it reads so fast because it's so kinetically paced. Everything's a lot of fun. There's so many great moments in it. When you finally see Superman and Spider-Man teaming up and the villains working together, I just loved every page of this.
Oh yeah, and you get a quick little epilogue at the end where it all really works out. Peter and J. Jonah Jameson have ironed things out a bit, and same thing with Clark and Morgan Edge, and they all get to go out to dinner, and it's nice. But we don't have to see them have dinner.
We talked about the big stuff and some of the things that we personally love, but all 96 pages of this comic book are filled to the brim with great stuff. We actually can't cover everything because the comic book is very long and there's so much in here to actually love. So if you have not read this comic book, people need to go check this one out. This one absolutely lives up to the hype.
Well, I've been doing this for almost 50 years. I have conservatively read 50,000 plus comics. This is my all-time favorite individual issue. I read it a couple times a year, and I still catch little things that I didn't catch in what is now well into double figures, because I may not get a couple times a year, but I mean, I know I've read this dozens of times, and it's just as much fun each time. And if I can thank them for one thing, the team up was great. Thank you for not using Aunt May.
Yes.
Joe, when you finally got this, obviously we weren't alive when this comic book came out. We didn't get to read it, as we were, finding comic books and all that stuff. But really, when you come back to this thing, you don't really hear people talking about this being one of the great comic book issues of all time. But really, it's one of the best I've ever read.
No, it's really great. I feel like, it kind of got memory holds for some people, because you can talk to people who are reading longer who, absolutely that's not the case. But, I think readers, around my age or like younger, it's like you think of, the Teen Titans X-Men crossover being a big one, and it was. I enjoyed that enough. Or a lot of people talk about the amalgam stuff, like a lot of the '90s readers, which I think is a lot of people who check out your show. They think of like what Ron Mars and Peter David were doing with the amalgam universe. But before all of that, you had something like this, and a lot of the things that people who are coming back to this that didn't read this at the time might think of, like, oh, well, I've sort of seen stuff like this happen before. It's like, well, yeah, but this was the first one, and this is the first time they're really doing it to this scale, and you really have to keep that stuff in mind.
So if people want to get this one, I'm sure it's in some trades and stuff like this, and I don't know if it's been reprinted or anything like that. Where can they find it for a reasonable price, Joe?
I mean, they have done enough reprints over the years, but like, I mean, if you want this version, and Breen can chime in on this, I think the original version, it's over $100-$200 at this point.
A couple hundred.
But they did, it's been reprinted, and you can find the reprints cheaper. You might end up shelling out, even like $30, $40, $50 for one of the reprints at this point, but it's worth it.
Yeah, here's a reprint. I think it was done sometime in the 90s. It's actually comic book size. Listen, there's a battered original copy. I still have my childhood copy, and I lucked into one about 15 years ago that's in mint condition. But yeah, they're out there if you're willing to pay for it. I think there's also an old trade that has the original crossovers. I think it has those two. Yeah, the Batman, Hulk, and it might have the Teen Titans and X-Men. And let me just say real quick, that is the one Joe's reference to, the X-Men, Teen Titans. That is the greatest crossover as far as like story and whatnot, because they made it feel like it was literally in continuity of both universes. Yeah, but I will still say that the first one is the most fun.
So I guess it's time to let people in on the secret here, Joe and Eric. This has actually been the last edition of the comic book retrospective, at least as like an ongoing series on the channel. We'll probably come revisit this maybe for a couple of specials here and there throughout the year, but it won't be coming out every single week like it has in the past. I want to say thank you very much to Joe, and this has been a lot of fun. What did you think about this?
No, this was great. It was a good opportunity to go back to a lot of stuff and check it out. Hopefully get other people to check some of that stuff out. There are plenty of issues that, we didn't get to that, we'd love to, maybe down the line in the future. If you're thinking of another classic comic to read, Hulk 261, where he fights the Absorbing Man on Easter Island. If we had more time, we'd probably do some stuff like that. Definitely check that out. But yeah, we hope people really got inspired to check out some of the older issues.
Yeah, you got any words to say, Bree?
Can't really put it better than what Joe just did, but it was fun to go back and revisit stories that, there's so much out there. And like I said, when that's kind of why I just ended up turning it over to Joe to let him pick, because he would find things that I may not have thought to read again, did get to read again and enjoy, one more time. So that's what was fun about this. And like I said, this was a lot of fun. Gonna miss it, but it was, like I said, it was a fun ride.
Like I said, big thanks to Joe and Eric. We've had so much fun doing this show over the years, just talking about some of the great comic books out there. This is not the first time we've talked about a big Superman crossover. Well, it is the first time with Marvel. We actually did a Superman Wonder Woman crossover where we see the Man of Steel fighting Wonder Woman. Lots of fun stuff we had there. Also, it kind of ties into history and stuff like that. I think it's also written by Gerry Conway. If you haven't seen that, definitely check it out here. If you don't see it there, there's a link in the video description.